Welcome to the Dey Weekly. I'm your host, Tim Lyons from Run Through the Jungle. I'll provide a quick recap from Week 16 versus the Browns. Then I'll cover all your fantasy football news. Well, not news, but fantasy point getters for the week. Now, to start with Week 16 versus the Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Cleveland Browns 24-6. Joe Burrow threw 3 touchdown passes, extended his streak to 7 consecutive games with at least 3 touchdowns. He finished the game with 252 yards passing. Jamar Chase had another impressive game, catching 6 passes for 97 yards and a touchdown, breaking his own franchise record with 1,510 receiving yards for the season. Cade York tied the Bengals franchise record with a 59-yard field goal as time expired in the first half. I was actually surprised he made it, but thank God he did. The Bengals defense forced 2 red zone turnovers, including a crucial fumble recovery by Von Bell at the Bengals 1-yard line. Dorian Thompson-Robinson started at quarterback for the Browns, throwing 2 interceptions and being sacked 5 times. Yes, I said 5 times, Bengals fans, 5 times. It wasn't just Trey Hendrickson getting sacks. The Browns struggled offensively and defensively, managed only 237 total yards and failing to convert key drives. The Bengals defense stepped up, and the Bengals' consistent performance led to a dominant win. Now to Week 17 versus the Broncos. I'm going to provide a quick preview of the game. Bengals are coming in at 7-8. The Broncos are coming in at 9-6. Joe Burrow has been on fire, throwing for at least 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in each of his last 7 games. The Bengals offense has been prolific, averaging 24-plus points in 7 straight games. Now the defensive concerns. The Bengals have struggled defensively, as we all know, allowing 359 yards a game and 26.2 points per game, which ranks among the worst in the NFL. Now, Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback, has made efficient and dual threat. He has been efficient in dual threat with 22 passing touchdowns and 352 rushing yards. The Broncos have a balanced attack with Javonte Williams from Notre Dame leading the rushing attack and Cortland Sutton as the primary receiving threat. The defensive strengths for the Broncos. The Broncos boast one of the best defenses in the NFL, allowing just 18.7 points per game and averaging 3.4 sacks per game. They lead the league in sacks with a total of 51 overall. So it's going to be a tough matchup, the Bengals offense versus their defense. Now let's see here. Joe Burrow's recent hot streak will be tested against the Broncos' stingy pass defense. The Bengals defense will need to step up to contain the Broncos' balanced offensive attack. This game is pivotal for both team playoff hopes, with the Bengals needing to win to keep their slim playoff chances alive. It's shaping up to be an exciting and crucial game for both teams. And now I'm just going to give you guys my pick for the game. I'm going to say that the Bengals win 34-31. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you want to hear our reactions to the games, come check us out on Roy Reactions on YouTube, or listen to all of us on all your favorite podcast platforms weekly. And also join us on Wednesdays for Running Through the Jungle's predictions. Now I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and I'll head into the NFL fantasy football from the semifinal week. Welcome back to the Dey Weekly. Again, I'm your host, Tim Lyons from Running Through the Jungle. Now, I'm going to start the fantasy football top scorer leaders from each position. Now, I know this is your guys' this is your championship week coming up. So don't forget to set those set your teams now, because tomorrow we have 2 games. We have the Chiefs and the Steelers, and the Ravens and the Texans. So you better set that final championship roster now. If you need somebody to start in your championship league or in your for your championship game because they got hurt or whatever, Bryce Young could be a possibility. He's playing against Tampa Bay this weekend. Okonkwo Wu for the Tennessee Titans, tight end, versus Jacksonville. Might be a good plug and play. Abdullah from the Las Vegas Raiders versus New Orleans. Gus Edwards versus the New England Patriots. And Dobbs from the Green Bay Packers versus Minnesota. You might want to plug and play those guys for your week 17. I know this is like I said, this is your championship week. You might need somebody. Now to the I'm Perfect lineup that got you into this championship week, if you have this lineup, that is. Jaden Daniels had 34.42 points. Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts had 39.8 points. Chuba Hubbard, I don't know. For the Carolina Panthers, had 32.5 points. Justin Jefferson had 36.4 points. Keenan Allen had 29.1 points. Brock Bowers, rookie from Las Vegas, here I go saying his name again this week, 20.9 points. A-Chain for the Miami Dolphins had 31 points. Brandon Aubrey for the Cowboys had 20 points. And the Falcons had 25 fantasy points for their defense and special teams, which would have given you 269.12 points and made you just coast right into your championship week. Now, if you had the I'm Not So Perfect lineup, this is provided to you from NFL Fantasy Football, would have had a total score of 22 points for this lineup. Matt Stafford only had 6 points. Brian Robinson Jr. for the Commanders only had 2.1 points. Charbonnet for the Seahawks only had 3.3 points. Amari Cooper, 2 points. Pittman Jr. only had 3.9 points. Kyle Pitts only had 1.7 points. Jerry Jeudy had 4 points. Hopkins for the Cleveland Browns, the kicker, had 0 points. And the 49ers defense special teams had -1 point. Like I said, it would give you 22 points for the week and would have sent you home, and you would have had no hope at going to the championship playoffs. Now to the top five, to the top five for each position. Starting off at quarterbacks, like I said, Jaden Daniels. He had 258 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He ran for 81 yards, had 34.42 points. Bryce Young for Carolina versus Arizona had 158 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, 68 rushing yards and 1 touchdown for 27.12 points. Jared Goff versus Chicago threw for 336 yards and 3 touchdowns, had -1 yards rushing for 25.34 points. Patrick Mahomes versus Houston had 260 passing yards and 1 touchdown, had 33 yards rushing and a touchdown for 23.70 points. Sam Darnold versus Seattle had 246 yards passing and 3 touchdowns and ran for 11 yards for 22.94 points. Now to the bell cows, the running backs. At number 1, Jonathan Taylor versus Tennessee had 218 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns for 39.80 points. Chuba Hubbard versus Arizona had 152 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 13 yards for 32.50 points. Devon A-Chain versus San Francisco had 120 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He had 6 receptions for 70 yards for 31 points. James Cook versus New England had 100 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He had 3 receptions for 26 yards and a touchdown for 27.60 points. Saquon Barkley versus Washington had 150 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns for 27 points. Now to the wide receivers. Justin Jefferson versus Seattle had 10 receptions, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 36.40 points. Keenan Allen versus Detroit had 9 receptions, 141 yards receiving, and 1 touchdown for 29.10 points. Brian Thomas Jr. versus the Las Vegas Raiders had 9 receptions for 132 yards and 1 touchdown for 28.20 points. Jameson Williams versus Chicago had 7 rushing yards. He had 5 receptions for 143 yards and a touchdown for 26 points. And Deebo Samuel comes in at number 5 versus Miami. had 25 rushing yards, 7 receptions for 96 yards and 1 touchdown for 25.10 points. Now to the tight ends, like I already said, Brock Bowers, rookie out of Las Vegas. Actually, he was out of Georgia. Now plays for Las Vegas versus Jacksonville. 11 receptions for 99 yards for 20.90 points. Excuse me. At number 2, Chig Okonkwo, I think it's how you pronounce his name, for the Tennessee Titans, a tight end, versus in Indianapolis, had 9 receptions for 81 yards and a 2-point conversion for 19.10 points. George Kittle versus Miami had 8 receptions, 106 yards for 18.60 points. Dalton Schultz versus Kansas City had 5 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown for 15.50 points. And David Njoku versus Cincinnati had 8 receptions for 66 yards, had 14.60 points. Now to the kickers, Brandon Aubrey versus Tampa Bay had 2 PATs and 3 field goals. 4 field goals. 3 of them were 50-plus yarders for 20 points. Jason Sanders versus San Francisco had 2 PATs and 5 field goals, 1 for 50-plus yards for 19 points. Jake Elliott versus Washington had 3 PATs and 4 field goals, 1 for 50-plus yards for 17 points. Chad Ryland versus Carolina, 3 PATs and 3 field goals, 1 for 50-plus yards for 14 points. Brandon McManus versus New Orleans, 4 PATs and 2 field goals, 1 for 50-plus yards for 12 points. And now to the defense and final. Atlanta Falcons defense was at number 1 versus the New York Giants. 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, scored 2 defensive touchdowns, only allowed 7 points for 25 fantasy points. And believe it or not, the Cincinnati Bengals versus Cleveland at number 2, 5 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery, only allowed 6 points for 18 fantasy points. So sorry, having technical difficulties over here. Green Bay Packers at number 3 versus New Orleans had 3 sacks, 1 interception, and 1 fumble recovery. Allowed 0 points for 17 fantasy points. The Buffalo Bills versus New England had 2 sacks, 1 interception, 2 fumble recoveries. Scored a defensive touchdown for 21 points, only allowed 21 points for 14 fantasy points. At number 5, the Baltimore Ravens versus Pittsburgh, 3 sacks, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery, 1 defensive touchdown, allowed 17 points for 14 fantasy points. Again, thank you guys so much for watching and listening and whatever on YouTube or all your podcast platforms. You could check us out again, like I said, on Wednesdays or Running Through the Jungle. Also catch our roaring reactions. Have a happy Merry Christmas to all, and have a great rest of your week. Hoo day.